Leftover Chinese food in the trash told me everything I needed to know. My wife had claimed she was at book club that Tuesday, the same Tuesday she always claimed for book club, but there were 2 sets of chopsticks in the container, and Diane hated Chinese food, had hated it for the entire 19 years we'd been married. Said the smell gave her a headache. I stood in our kitchen at 11:30 at night, holding that takeout box under the overhead light, turning it slowly, looking at the 2 fortune cookies still sealed in their plastic wrappers. She hadn't even bothered to throw them away separately. The question that settled in my chest wasn't loud. It was quiet and cold, the kind of question that already knows its answer. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 47 years old, and I've spent the last 22 years as a forensic accountant. My entire career is built on one principle: numbers don't lie, but the people behind them almost always do. You learn to look for the small inconsistencies, the figures that don't quite line up, the expense that has no corresponding receipt. Most people think fraud looks like a dramatic confession or a smoking gun. In my experience, it looks like 2 fortune cookies in a trash can at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. I put the takeout box back exactly where I found it and went upstairs. Diane was already in bed, her breathing slow and even, her phone face down on the nightstand. I lay beside her in the dark and stared at the ceiling and started building my case. The next morning, I pulled 3 months of credit card statements from our shared account and spread them across my home office desk. I'd glanced at them before, paid them without looking too carefully, the way you do when you trust someone completely. Now I looked. A charge at Marcello's on a Wednesday, she said she was at her sister's. $94 at the Lake House Grill on a Friday she told me was a work dinner with her regional team. Except her regional team was based in Phoenix, and nobody had flown in that week because I'd heard her complain about the travel budget just days before. A florist charge for $60 on a date I couldn't immediately account for. I opened a new spreadsheet and started categorizing. By the time I finished, I had 11 unexplained charges over 14 weeks. Diane worked as a marketing director for a mid-sized commercial real estate firm. She was good at her job, charming, persuasive, the kind of woman who walked into a room and immediately understood the social architecture of it. She'd applied those same skills to our marriage for the better part of 2 decades, which meant I'd trusted her completely, and she'd known exactly how to use that trust. I thought about that while I labeled column D of my spreadsheet confirmed alibi and started working backward through our shared calendar. My son Owen was home from his 2nd year of college for spring break. He was 19, dark-haired, like Diane but quiet like me. The kind of kid who noticed things without announcing them. He was eating cereal at the kitchen island when I came downstairs that first morning, and something in the way he watched me pour my coffee told me he'd been waiting. "Dad," he said, not looking up from his bowl. "Yeah, you okay?" I sat down across from him. In 19 years of parenting, Owen had never opened a conversation that way unless something was already wrong. "Why are you asking?" He pushed his bowl to the side and folded his hands on the counter, a gesture so deliberate and adult it caught me off guard. "I've been trying to figure out how to say something to you since Christmas," he said. I kept telling myself it was none of my business and that I was probably wrong. He looked up. "I don't think I was wrong." I told him to tell me everything, and he did. He'd seen Diane at a restaurant in November, a month before Christmas, when he was driving back from a friend's place, a small Italian place on Ridgewood Avenue that we'd never been to as a family. She was at a table near the window with a man Owen didn't recognize, and the way she was looking at him was the thing Owen couldn't explain, except to say it wasn't the way she looked at me. He'd driven home and gone to his room and told himself there was probably an innocent explanation, and then the innocent explanation hadn't come, and Christmas had come instead. And he'd sat through the whole holiday watching me help his mother wrap presents and make her coffee the way she liked it and carry in the groceries she forgot in the car, and he hadn't been able to eat much. "She made me cover for her once," he said. "In January, before I went back to school, she asked me to tell you she was at her mother's if you asked. I told her I'd leave for campus early instead." He looked at his hands. "I should have told you then. I'm sorry." I told him he had nothing to be sorry for. I meant it. I spent the next week working methodically, the same way I work a client's books when I suspect irregularities. I wasn't angry yet, or if I was, The anger was filed neatly behind the task. My second morning, I drove past the office of Diane's firm and found her car in the lot, which was fine. What wasn't fine was the white pickup parked 2 spaces down with a contractor's logo on the door. Webb & Associates Home Services, that I recognized as belonging to Trevor Hale. He was their building contractor. I'd met him twice at company events. A big, easy-smiling man in his early 40s who'd shaken my hand and told me my wife talked about me all the time. I'd liked him instinctively. I noted that now with a kind of professional appreciation for the irony. My third stop was my accountant's office. Not for my personal finances, for Diane's business expenses, which ran through a corporate card she managed. Her firm had named me the secondary authorized user years ago for convenience, and that authorization had never been removed. Her assistant, a college kid named Bradley who clearly didn't know the full situation, emailed me 3 months of statements within the hour. Trevor Hale's name appeared as a vendor across 11 separate invoices. The work orders were legitimate on paper. Renovation consultations, site assessments, material quotes. But the corresponding dates aligned almost perfectly with Diane's unexplained calendar gaps. They weren't just conducting an affair, they'd built the paper infrastructure to hide it inside her regular professional workflow. As a forensic accountant, I genuinely had to admire the construction for a moment before I started dismantling it. I documented everything, printed it, stored copies in 3 separate locations, including a secure cloud folder my personal attorney, Daniel Patterson, had access to. Daniel had handled my business contracts for a decade. When I called him, he listened without interrupting, asked 2 clarifying questions, and said, "Before she files anything, we need to protect your LLC and your retirement accounts. Today, Marcus, not next week." We spent 4 hours in his office that afternoon. When I left, my business assets were restructured. The joint account had been reduced to a reasonable operating balance, and Daniel had already begun a preliminary filing review. I wasn't taking anything that wasn't mine. I was simply making sure she couldn't take anything that wasn't hers. That evening, Diane came home and made pasta and talked about a difficult client and asked if Owen had seemed okay to me lately. I watched her hands while she stirred the sauce and thought about the 11 vendor invoices and said yes. Owen seemed great. How was her day? I also, that evening, had a quiet conversation with my doctor about ordering a paternity test. Owen was 19 and unquestionably my son in every way that mattered. But I'd read enough case files to know that certainty without documentation is just hope, with good lighting. The results came back 2 weeks later confirming what I already knew. I filed them with everything else. The following Tuesday, Book Club Tuesday, I drove to the address my phone carrier's family plan had been quietly logging every time Diane's location stopped moving for more than 40 minutes. It was a townhouse complex off Brennan Road, 10 minutes from our house. Trevor Hale's name was on the lease. I sat in my car across the street and watched Diane's silver SUV in the visitor parking lot and felt the last thread of any doubt I'd been carrying simply let go. I drove home, made myself a sandwich, and called Daniel. "She's there right now," I said. "Good," he said. "We'll need the pattern established, not just one instance. Keep documenting. 2 or 3 more and we have an unambiguous record." "I know," I said. "I've done this before. Not with your own marriage." "No," I said, "not with my own marriage." What I hadn't anticipated was Diane's best friend, Karen, deciding to intervene first. Karen Briggs had been Diane's closest friend since their sorority days. She was a high school vice principal, perpetually confident, perpetually involved in things that were not her business. She appeared at our door on a Thursday evening while Owen and I were watching a game. Her expression arranged into something she probably thought looked concerned. She wanted to talk to me privately. Owen muted the television and studied his phone with the focused disinterest of a kid who is absolutely listening to everything. Karen sat at our kitchen table and told me that Diane had mentioned I'd been distant lately, withdrawn, that she was worried about our marriage, that sometimes people went through difficult periods and it was important not to make permanent decisions based on temporary feelings. I poured myself a glass of water and listened. "She loves you, Marcus. She's just been going through something. If you'd be willing to try counseling, I really think." "Karen," I said, "when did she tell you about Trevor?" The pause was brief but complete. "She didn't tell me about. She's been parking at his place on Brennan Road every Tuesday for at least 3 months. I have the location data. I have the credit card records. I have the vendor invoices. I have a conversation I'm not going to describe right now, but that you should know exists. I set my glass down. Now I'm going to ask you again. When did she tell you? Karen stared at the table. January, she said quietly. She said it wasn't serious. Did she ask you to come here tonight? Another pause. She said you'd been acting strange and she was worried. She sent you to find out what I know, I said. That's what this is. You can tell her that I know everything, and that I've been documenting it professionally for 6 weeks, and that Daniel Patterson is handling the next steps. I stood up. I'd also suggest, Karen, that you be very careful about what you say to other people about my mental state or my behavior in the coming weeks, because I have a record of this conversation, and I'll use it. Karen left quickly. Owen came to the kitchen doorway after her car pulled out. She was sent as a scout, he said. Yes. What's the next step? I looked at my son, 19 years old, and trying very hard to be steady about something that was unsteadying him considerably, and felt a specific kind of love that has no clean name. The next step is the Riverside Neighborhood Association dinner, I said. 3 weeks from Saturday. Owen blinked. You're going to do something there. The whole neighborhood will be there. Everyone Diane has carefully cultivated a reputation with for the last 12 years. The school board members she lunches with, the women from her wellness group, every couple from every dinner party we've hosted. I sat back down. She's been managing what people think of her for our entire marriage. The most honest thing I can do is let them think clearly for once. Is that revenge or justice? Both, I said. Sometimes they're the same thing. I want to be precise about what happened next, because the version Diane later told people was considerably different from reality. She came home that Friday and sat across from me in the living room and told me she needed to be honest about something. She'd been struggling, she said. She'd been feeling disconnected from our marriage for a long time. Invisible, undervalued. Trevor was someone who made her feel seen. She wasn't proud of it. But she needed me to understand that this wasn't about me being a bad husband. It was about her needs not being met. It was about the kind of emotional intimacy she'd been craving for years. I listened to all of it. Then I asked, were there others? She blinked. What? Before Trevor, were there others? The silence lasted 4 seconds. I counted. That's not relevant to. It is to me. She looked at the window. There was someone 2 years ago. A conference in Atlanta. It was one weekend. It didn't mean anything. I nodded, made a mental note to pull credit card records from 2 years ago, which I'd already done, and which confirmed a charge at the Whitmore Hotel in Atlanta for 2 nights on a weekend she'd told me was a regional training seminar. I want you to sign a postnuptial agreement, I said. Her expression shifted. A postnuptial agreement, confirming that documented infidelity by either party forfeits any claim to alimony and results in an equal rather than favorable asset split. I slid the document across the coffee table. Daniel had prepared it that week. She read the first page and put it down. You've already talked to a lawyer. I've been talking to Daniel for 6 weeks. The mask came off, not dramatically. Not in the way it happens in movies. It came off the way a professional facade comes off when someone realizes the performance is over. A slight relaxation around the eyes, a recalibration of posture, a voice dropping to its actual register. I'm not signing that, she said. And if you think you're going to humiliate me in this community after everything I've done to build our life here, you don't know me at all. I know you completely, I said. That's the problem. She filed for divorce 11 days later, which was 2 days before the Riverside Neighborhood Association annual dinner. Her attorney, a partner at the firm she'd chosen specifically for its reputation in contentious asset litigation, had put together a filing that characterized me as financially controlling and emotionally withholding. A husband who had undermined her professional confidence and managed the household finances in ways designed to limit her independence. It was a document of considerable creativity. Daniel called me after reviewing it and said, "This is designed to make you angry enough to do something impulsive. Don't." "I won't," I said. "The dinner is in 2 days." "I know, Marcus. It'll be clean," I said. "I promise." The Riverside Neighborhood Association held its annual dinner at Elmwood Hall every spring, a fundraiser for the Community Scholarship Fund that my family had attended for 9 consecutive years. 200 people, round tables with white linens, a silent auction along the back wall, and a program that included remarks from the association president, a community achievement award, and a slideshow of the year's neighborhood highlights put together by the events committee. Diane was on the events committee. I arrived early and had a brief conversation with the audiovisual coordinator, a college student named Marco who managed the evening's presentation equipment. I told him I'd prepared a short tribute video for the Community Scholarship Fund and asked if I could have a few minutes during the program to share it. I was a known donor, a long-time attendee, a familiar face. He said of course, and I gave him a USB drive. Diane arrives 20 minutes later with Karen and 2 other women from her social circle, all of them aware of the divorce filing, all of them wearing expressions of collective solidarity that communicated without words, that the narrative had already been written and distributed. She saw me from across the room and held my gaze for exactly 1 second before looking away. Trevor was not present. He'd been quietly removed from the firm's active vendor list the previous week. Not by me, but by Diane's own CFO, who'd reviewed the invoices at Daniel's request as part of the discovery process, and had apparently found the expense documentation insufficient to withstand professional scrutiny. Some things resolved themselves when you simply shine the right light on them. I made small talk for an hour. I talked to the Hendersons about their new fence project and to Bill Archer about his daughter's swim team. I accepted quiet, sincere condolences from people who'd heard about the divorce and expressed them carefully without taking sides. I appreciated the restraint. At 8:15, the association president called for attention. The program proceeded normally through the welcome remarks and the Community Achievement Award. Then, she said there would be a brief presentation from one of the association's longtime supporters, and she gestured toward me. I walked to the front of the room. Diane was sitting at a table in the center, her expression controlled and watchful. "Most of you know me," I said. "I've been coming to this dinner for 9 years, and I've always believed that this community is built on honesty. The idea that we look out for each other, that we don't smile at someone's face while helping dismantle their life behind their back. I want to share something tonight in that spirit." I nodded to Marco, and the first slide appeared on the screen behind me. It was a spreadsheet. Clean, clearly formatted, the kind of document I produce professionally, showing 14 weeks of Diane's undisclosed charges cross-referenced with the alibis she'd provided me. Marcello's on a Wednesday, the Lake House Grill on a Friday, a hotel in Atlanta 2 years ago. Each row a date, a charge, a stated alibi, a confirmed actual location. There was a sound in the room that wasn't quite silence and wasn't quite a gasp. Something in between. The next slide was a map view from our family plan's location history, showing the address on Brennan Road and the frequency of visits over 12 weeks. Nothing explicit, nothing prurient, just data, presented clearly, the way I present data for a living. The third slide was the credit card records from Diane's corporate account, with Trevor Hale's vendor invoices highlighted and the corresponding calendar dates marked in red. I'd redacted the firm's name to protect people who had nothing to do with this. I was not trying to burn down something that belonged to innocent people. "My wife's attorney filed a document this week," I said, characterizing me as controlling and financially manipulative. "I want the people in this room, who've known us both for nearly a decade, to have access to the same information I do and draw their own conclusions." The final slide was a single audio waveform. I looked at Karen before I played it. 3 weeks ago, I said, Diane sent a mutual friend to our home to determine what evidence I gathered. I'd like you to hear part of that conversation. Karen's voice came to the room speakers clear and unhurried. She said it wasn't serious. She's just been going through something. She said you've been acting strange. Then my own voice. She sent you to find out what I know. A pause, and Karen again, January. She said it wasn't serious. I stopped the recording there. "I've provided Daniel Patterson with complete documentation of everything you've just seen," I said, "including a paternity confirmation for our son, which is relevant to the custody portion of this proceeding. Everything is legally obtained, accurately represented, and already in the hands of the court." I set the microphone down on the podium. "I appreciate your time. The scholarship fund will receive my annual contribution by end of week, regardless of anything else that's happening in my personal life. Thank you for 9 good years of dinners." I walked back to my table. Diane stood up. Her chair scraped back across the floor, and the sound cut through the room like something breaking. Her face was the kind of pale that doesn't come from shock alone. It comes from watching something you've constructed very carefully simply stop being true. You had no right, she said. Her voice was steady, which told me how angry she was. Diane's voice only went steady when she was past the point of performing. I had every right, I said. You filed a document in a court of law characterizing my behavior in specific ways. I presented accurate information to people in a position to observe us both. I didn't fabricate anything. This is harassment. This is a spreadsheet, Diane. I kept my voice level. I've been making spreadsheets for 22 years. It's what I do. Karen was on her feet now, her face closed and furious. Two of the other women at Diane's table had pushed back slightly from it, the kind of small unconscious movement that means they're no longer sure which side they're on. The association president was at the microphone trying to redirect the program. A few people were leaving. More were staying. Marco was very carefully looking at his equipment. Diane took one step toward me and then stopped. I think she understood that everything she said in the next 30 seconds would be replayed and repeated in every conversation this community had for the next month, and she was still, even now, calculating. I will destroy you in court, she said quietly. Possibly, I said, but you'll do it with accurate information about who did what to whom, not a revised narrative designed for a sympathetic judge. I picked up my jacket from the back of my chair. Owen is staying with me until we have a custody arrangement. He's 19, so his preference carries weight with the court. I'd suggest calling him. I left through the side door. Owen was in the parking lot, leaning against my car in the cold, his hands in his pockets. He'd stayed home tonight by choice, and I hadn't pushed it. He looked up when he heard my footsteps. How'd it go? Exactly as planned. He studied my face for a moment. You okay? I thought about that honestly. The drive home, the empty half of the closet that was already emptying itself by degrees, the 19 years of a life that had been built on a foundation I now understood had always had cracks in it. You can love something and still be better off without it. You can grieve something and still be grateful the truth came out. I will be, I said. Get in. We drove home through the neighborhood we'd both lived in for years, past the Hendersons' new fence and the community park and the corner where Owen used to wait for the school bus. And neither of us said anything because there wasn't anything that needed to be said right now. Some silences aren't empty, they're just quiet. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Daniel had done his work thoroughly, and Diane's attorney, facing a record of documented infidelity that included 2 years of financial evidence and an audio recording that had already been heard by half the county, had substantially revised her initial demands. I kept the house, my business, and my retirement accounts. Diane received a fair settlement, fair by the actual terms of our actual marriage, not the fictional version she tried to submit to the court. She moved to Portland, where I genuinely hope she figures out whatever it is she was actually looking for. Owen handled it the way 19-year-olds handle things when they've been through something real, by being quieter for a while, and then gradually less quiet, and then one afternoon in July by showing up at my workshop and asking if I could teach him how to refinish a table. I said yes. We spent 4 hours in there sanding and talking about nothing in particular, and somewhere around the 3rd hour, I thought this is the foundation. This is the thing that holds. Karen Briggs sent me a message 6 weeks after the dinner. It was 2 sentences. I should have said something to you months ago instead of getting involved in something that wasn't my place. I'm sorry. I read it twice and typed back. I appreciate that. Because I did. It costs something to admit a thing like that. Most people just let it pass. I still do forensic accounting. I still look for the small inconsistencies, the figures that don't quite align, the detail that seems minor until you hold it up to the light and see what it reflects. I still believe that the truth is almost always in the small things. A receipt in the wrong category. A meeting that runs long in the wrong direction. 2 fortune cookies in a takeout container that only one person was supposed to eat. The difference now is that I know what to do when I find it.